It's a tough sport. It's not for everybody. You got to be a little sick to love this game, and we got some sickos.
Welcome to NFL Daily, Saturday Sickos edition. And yes, NFL Daily is a place where you have to be a little sick to go through all the different men in the league that might be losing their jobs in the coming weeks. But we're not dunking on them. We're not celebrating the fact that it does really pique the interest, I think, of all the teams that are out of the mix in the NFL. I'm Gregg Rosenthal. I'm with Ollie Connolly from the Read Optional podcast and Substack. Are you ready to go through all of the coaching situations? And then at the end, get a little more positive, talk about the candidates we might want to see get jobs in this cycle.
I'm very ready. Maybe a couple of guys I would dunk on, I think. Just a couple. Just a couple here or there.
That's fine.
Some intriguing potential openings.
Yeah, now you're not technically like an employee of the NFL, so you can do that. That's what you're bringing from another continent, that you're just feeling free and easy. iHeart's taking care of Ollie, so you can say whatever you want about the Cleveland Browns. No, actually, they have a good head coach. So here's what I'm going to do. To start the show, I'm just going to break it up, and you can disagree with how I broke it up, but basically go through all the situations that we think there's going to be a change or could be a change, maybe come up with a number at the end of like the rough over-under of how many coaching changes there's going to be, talk about some potential surprises, and then at the end, we'll go through some of the candidates we think will be popular on this cycle. So I went with 4 definites. We'll call this he gone, or, they're already open. The Titans and the Giants, they've already made a change at head coach, and the other 2 I would put in this category would be the Cleveland Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders. I've been wrong before, but I just can't see a scenario where they bring back Kevin Stefanski. I believe they're going to do a full reboot in Cleveland in terms of the front office and the head coaching staff. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that, and I think it's time. Stefanski, I watch now, and he just seems so fatigued and tired that to kind of get up and go again, I think is tough. And I think looking at the cycle in general, that I know he's probably going to be in the mix because of how thin the other options are, but I would really advise Kevin Stefanski, not that he cares about my opinion, to go and do the year off stuff. Go and do the tour, go and do the Mike McCarthy thing, go and sit and do the McAfee show for a year or whatever, go and do the Vrabel thing, get on someone's sideline for a year and just take a year out to chill, get yourself back in the next cycle. I think he's as ready to go as they are ready to move on.
Yeah, I think that benefited Mike Vrabel. I guess we'll never know what the Patriots would have looked like a year before if they had hired Vrabel instead of Mayo, but it just makes logical sense. He's a 2-time Coach of the Year winner. Here's the thing, though. We'll go through. There's not like slam dunk options to hire this year, and I think Kevin Stefanski will be high on some teams' list. But I think when you make the case for the Browns front office, too, and you think, well, this draft class is great, and then you look at the cap situation they're in next year, and if you actually just even remove the Deshaun Watson of it all, the worst trade in the history of the NFL, they have so many veteran players that aren't going to be on the team next year or shouldn't be on the team next year that they're going to be paying that aren't even there, and that's all because of the front office, and whatever their identity was, it's gone now. Like that offensive line does not exist anymore. So I think you need a total fresh start in Cleveland.
I agree with you, because even the positives would be okay. We have a league-leading defense. We know how up and down that is year to year. Kind of some crucial contributors are older or aging and probably won't be on the team next season. You got to re-sign them at fat deals, and then that thing would just fall apart. Maybe Jim Schwartz gets hired elsewhere. Maybe you bring in a new head coach who doesn't want to work with Jim Schwartz. So trying to think that thing can sustain throughout. I think you just thank Andrew Berry for drafting Carson Schlesinger and Quinton Judkins and Harold Fannin, and you see him on his way.
Yeah, the Raiders are the other team here. And I wonder if Jim Schwartz, we didn't write him down as retreads. He certainly will be a popular defensive coordinator candidate. I wonder if Cleveland would even think about him if they just want to elevate him and not get too funky. That wouldn't totally shock me. The Raiders are the other team here. I just can't see how Pete Carroll survives this. I think they'll keep the front office and give that front office a chance to make another head coaching hire. It's just been one of the most disorganized, like one and done looking seasons from the outside that I can imagine. Do you agree there?
Yeah, I didn't think anywhere could get more dysfunctional than Gerard Mayo in New England. Somehow Pete, one of the all-time greats, found a way to top it, and just their thought process throughout. So they go from Tom Brady, who is running the organization. I get Raiders fans all the time telling me he's not running the organization, you're overstating it. Pete Carroll at his press conference said this is Tom Brady's chance to run a franchise. So they go from Ben Johnson and Matthew Stafford as a package deal to Pete Carroll trading for Geno Smith. He brings his buddy in from Michigan, John Spytek, who he worked with the Bucks. They draft their running back 6th overall, and they turn him over to Pete's kid running the offensive line. The worst group and coaching job I've seen in 15 years, running an offensive line. So they do that. They make Chip Kelly the highest paid coordinator in the history of the sport. Whatever you think of Chip Kelly, personality skills, all that stuff, it'd be nice if you paid someone that much money to let them do the job they were hired to do. They bring back Patrick Graham, which I thought was a sensible idea, but then tell him to run not his defense, to run Pete's defense from like 12 years ago that's completely outdated. It is the most dysfunctional situation I think you could imagine. And the only thing I think you can hold on to have some kind of overlay and some kind of language continuity between the entire franchise will be to keep Spytek and reset again with the staff.
Yeah, and this is the time of year that you get a lot of reports in the media that are thinly veiled attempts to blame the coach or the front office, and we've had some of that in Vegas. But sometimes it's convincing, and you just made the convincing case of why Carroll ultimately, when you're looking at the draft picks too, that like some of these guys were Carroll's guys that I'm okay blaming it on Carroll for this year. Obviously, nothing is 100% one guy's fault, but I'm okay with them redoing it.
It's not his fault, but he's clearly the power center of the organization. The draft picks look like his draft picks from the end in Seattle, and yet then they don't play. So if the front office was like, could you please play the rookies anyway that we selected, he chooses not to play, and we get the weird reports where the rookies are trying out along the offensive line because the line stinks, and then he pulls it last second, being like, you know what, they're not very good. And you just can't have that kind of stuff. And he was supposed to bring in organizational competence. That was the point, then hand it off to someone else after a couple of seasons. It's one of the biggest misfires I think we've seen in recent times.
That the one last job does not work in the NFL. I do think it's a young man's game, or at least like whatever you want to say when you're in your 50s and 60s on your second job, that part of your career. I will get ageist. It reminds me a lot of the Mike Holmgren presidential era in Cleveland, not as a coach, when he was the front office guy in Cleveland. It's just like, yeah, Pete Carroll can buy a lot more boats now. So,
I will say though, I'm a big fan of the retread candidates more than consensus. Everyone likes like the hot new young thing. I think if you look at the history of the league, whether it's Belichick in New England, Vrabel in New England now, Pete in Seattle, Gary Kubiak, I think there's a lot to be said for the retread guys. Stefanski I would be intrigued by. But I think they get the second chance, and you've always got to have 1 year out. You got to go recharge, you go around, you prove your energy, you go and discover new ideas, you build a new younger staff around you. I think doing it at that age was a step too far.
Hell, how about John Fox's Broncos making it to the Super Bowl? I don't know if that's a winner or not. Okay, now in my next category. And so that's 4 teams we have that I feel pretty confident about. Although the reporting in Cleveland and in Vegas hasn't been clear. It just, you've seen enough of these situations before to have a good feel. The 2 I'm leaning that there will be a change. I thought about putting the Falcons in the definite category. I did not, but I think Raheem Morris is certainly in trouble. And even though the reporting's been mixed in Arizona, I've just seen enough of these where when a team starts getting their teeth kicked in over and over at the end of the year, it's year 3, which is supposed to be the big build year. Jonathan Gannon's a defensive coach. I've liked a lot of the things they've done over the last few years. It's been an interesting team to watch that I think overachieved for 2 years and then now underachieving this year. I just think the way this season is gone, I'd be a little surprised if Gannon is there, barring some 3-game winning streak at the end of the season, which can always change things.
Even then, I think to the Rams game and for the entire second half, they are completely blown out, and the cameras just hold on Monty Ossenfort sat next to Michael Bidwell for like 2 straight hours, and he's telling him, trust me, the roster's pretty good. Go look at the draft class. Will Johnson, Walter Nolan, not bad if you look at the defensive draft class. This isn't me. This is Jonathan. It's Nick. And I think it's pretty clear those guys themselves are like looking for property in Miami or something like that, because it just feels like everything's checked out and it's done.
And you figure Kyler Murray is done with this organization. That's assuming Ossenfort is there, which I would tend to believe he'll get another chance. But you never know with the Bidwells. The Cardinals have been an unpredictable organization over the years. And so like they have some pieces, they're not in the worst situation. Would you rather be the next head coach of the Falcons or the Cardinals?
Falcons for division. not for the roster. If you gave me the roster straight up, I'd probably take the Cardinals one at a push. But to be in the NFC South, I would prefer to be in the NFC West.
Yeah, it is tricky. If you put the Cardinals even in the NFC South this year, who knows? We might be talking about just like a 6-8 team that's vaguely disappointing, but got by because there were a lot of close losses early for that Cardinals team. Do you think they'll clean out, if you had to guess, Raheem and Terry Fontenot? Terry Fontenot, that would be a third head coach that he would get to hire if they didn't. And I'm like holding out a little space here when we're doing this 3 weeks out, that sometimes these final weeks can change things. These two teams actually play each other on Sunday, and if Atlanta ever got something going down the stretch, maybe Arthur Blank could convince himself to give this group another chance.
I would lean towards, if I was Arthur Blank, I think I'd lean towards keeping Raheem and letting Terry go. I think Terry's the worst talent evaluator and executive in the NFL. Just flat out.
Wow.
I think he's bad at this. And I think his major key decisions prove that. And you can't have as many seismic bad decisions as he's had. Trading a first-round pick for James Pierce, giving the money to Kirk Cousins, drafting Michael Penix. Individually, they're all fireable offenses. He's got 3 of them on the rap sheet. And I do think Arthur Blank will sit back and look and say, Bill Belichick, disaster at North Carolina. But that was kind of my door B option. This guy convinced me not to do it because he was scared of his own job and all of the staff around him, which I get, self-preservation, understand, but maybe I should have taken door B and given it a chance. And so I think they'll do that now. I would be inclined to give Raheem one last go around just because the options are pretty thin. I really respect him. I think what he's done defensively, Jeff Ulbrich, has been pretty impressive, remaking it and making it better than the sum of the parts Terry has given to him. So I'd be open to that eventuality. It's just hard to see that they would do kind of a nuclear reset at the front office scouting department and also keep the head coach.
You mentioned Ulbrich, who we didn't write down in our defensive guys. I mean, this is a kind of a wide open group of candidates. Who knows? He could get some looks, maybe even by the Falcons. Yeah, Raheem, I thought he'd be better second time around. I don't think it's crazy, but I also think it's dangerous if you're looking for a general manager requiring him to keep the head coach that's there. It's always a little tricky. Okay, so if those two were gone, and I'm just leaning that way with Atlanta, that would be 6, which maybe is around my over-under. My next 2 teams where I'm leaning safe are the Bengals and the Jets. I think the Bengals should make a change. Do you agree that they should make a change?
Oh, it's 2 years overdue with Zac Taylor, I think. And it's really tricky. I don't want to psychoanalyze Joe Burrow, the stuff going on, the press conferences and all that jazz. If they're going to make a change, I think the easiest, most palatable one to make is to go and get Joe Brady from the Bills. I don't think every coaching candidate is a fit for every job. I think those guys are very rare. I think Vrabel and Johnson the last cycle. Other than that, you're looking for a very specific guy for a very specific place based on what you have. I think someone needs to push Joe Burrow more than he's been pushed in his life. And the guy to do that would be the person who had the most success in his life with Joe Brady at LSU. Joe Brady's evolved his style of offense. Joe Burrow desperately needs to accept and evolve his style of play as he kind of matures through the stage of his career. And so if you bring in a guy who he really respects, had the best time of his life with in college, I think that would be a really smart fit and a really smart change. Otherwise, I'm not sure it'd be worth just kind of ripping Zac Taylor out to just put any name B in there.
So Zac Taylor took a lot of questions at his last press conference about a report that his contract had been extended without it being reported previously until 2027. So that would mean there would be 2 years left on the deal, that he would not be a lame duck coach next year, which was always a conversation towards the end of Marvin Lewis. Sometimes they let it go to the end. Sometimes they wouldn't, and then Marvin Lewis would just stay. I'm assuming that report is correct based on the way Zac Taylor answered the questions, which were non-answers. That made me really feel like he is going to be safe, and the people that cover that team generally don't think Duke Tobin, who really is their personnel chief, is in any sort of trouble. That there's almost like a 0% chance Duke Tobin would lose his job, and that Zac Taylor is not far off from that 0%. You never know, though. You just seen enough of these seasons end. They just lost 2 straight games to Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. If you happen to lose 3 more in a row to Quinn Ewers, Jacoby Brissett, and Shadur Sanders, yeah. That might make it tough. So win some of these games. I know it shouldn't matter, but if it did, I don't know.
It feels like, based on how they've operated the last year, like the most impactful guy in the building was Lou Anarumo. They kicked him out. They blamed him for everything. So it feels like the logic doesn't play into things with them. Obviously, it's heavily money-based. It feels like it's really up to Joe Burrow. If he just went and knocked on the door and had the meeting, he could probably have the power to get this thing done. He had the power to make them go and build a roster in a ludicrous way in the modern game because he wanted to keep all his pals around and pay him big money, get himself some big money. So could he just knock on the door and say, I think this thing has run its course, and that's why I'm unhappy playing the sport. If I had someone new in him, maybe I would enjoy it a little bit more. I think that's kind of where it sits, and I have not seen anything that would suggest that. I mean, Zac Taylor lets Joe Burrow do everything he wants to do on offense. So does he really want to go and chase something new? I would hope that he does.
The Jets are the other team I just threw in here. Just because Mike Florio threw it out. Knowing him, working for him, there's probably something to that. I don't think he's just throwing it out. So that was surprising to me that he would even put that up as a possibility, that Aaron Glenn could be one and done. But the Jets are as chaotic a franchise in making these types of decisions as we have. So you can't totally rule it out. How have you felt about Aaron Glenn's first year post Steve Wilkes firing now?
Yeah, disaster. I think he should be one and done. I don't think they'll do it. And I think they've got to look at it now and say it's a different job than the one we hired him for. We hired him for this kind of like mini reset. We were going to sign Justin Fields as a bridge quarterback, multi-year deal. We think we've got young talent. The defense should be good. He's a defensive guy. It's been an abomination all the way around, both kind of the culture and the style and the environment there. Then the on-field performance. They have players quitting all the time. I thought their linebackers quit in like week 9. Then Steve Wilkes leaks, not very well, that he believed the linebackers quit in like week 12. He was a couple of weeks late to figure that out. And so it's now a job where it's a full-on reset with this massive cache of ammunition to go and reinvigorate the franchise. And do you want to turn that over to him? Now, you could nail the personnel decisions and then hand it off to someone else in a couple of years. I would just like to have a full reset and go again with the guy we think could be here 6, 7, 8 years. And I just don't see it with Glenn. Sometimes you just get the feeling and you know immediately like this is not going to work out for 5, 6 years. And I just have that feeling with Aaron Glenn.
You make a case, and it makes me think maybe it is more possible in general because of the history there. You mentioned the Steve Wilkes source. I think you're referring to the Josina Anderson tweet. But to assume that was Steve Wilkes in the tweet, that he was the source, and it's a wild one. Check out Josina Anderson Jets tweet from this week. You would have to assume then that Steve Wilkes is sort of talking in the third person about Steve Wilkes to Josina Anderson.
It could that is true. It could also be really bad reportage in which you're trying to cover up the source, but you accidentally leave 2 bits in the early part of the quote that reveals the source. That's been done before. I
mean, their linebackers have been bad. I'll back up that source.
Not just the linebackers. This is for the true sickos. One thing I always do towards the end of the season when teams I think are quitting is you go and you pull up their interception return tape. How interested are they in interception return? It tells you everything about a football team. Used to be kickoff stuff. We don't got that no more. Interception return. They don't even have an interception return to pull up the tape to find out if these guys care to actually play football anymore. Are they interested in blocking? Is the sideline going crazy? A guy's racing out there to celebrate from the offensive side. You watch the Niners, just a decimated squad. You can go and find the Lenore interception against the Texans. Everyone is trying to race out onto the field before the play's even over. They are so fired up and giddy to have got the ball back. Everyone is looking for work. Everyone's punching. Upton Stout is running all over the place. The Jets don't even have that. I went to look at passes deflected to see if there was one those guys thought they had. So then they would get involved in the action. Don't even have that on film. So it's just a limp, lifeless defense to me, which is what he was brought in to completely regenerate. If that's the selling point, I think that's just been proven to be wrong.
Yeah, and they had a moment. It was that victory over the Falcons, which was a very strange game if you watch that, where I thought, okay, Aaron Glenn has talked all year about the 2021 Lions, their first season there, about how towards the end of the season, yes, they started out with a horrible record with Jared Goff. He lost his first 7 games, but by the end of the season, they were playing hard. You could see the vision. It was resulting in some wins, but you could just more see it on the field. And I thought, okay, that Falcons win, maybe this is the start of something. And yeah, in the 2 weeks since, they've gotten absolutely destroyed, and the defense has been a total disaster. So,
this is the thing, though. That selling point of the Lions includes this idea that Dan Campbell, he took play calling duty off Anthony Lynn. He took it for himself. Then he got Ben Johnson. So is the Steve Wilks a sacrificial lamb to that? Because that happened way early in the year. And Dan Campbell's had a very clear vision for when we are good, when we're playing in a title game, this is what the team will look like. And this isn't acceptable. It does not look like that right now. I don't get that vibe off Aaron Glenn that he understands today what a Jets team under Aaron Glenn would look like in the AFC title game. And like, we're racing towards that vision. In the final 4 weeks, you'll kind of see the small embers of it.
Yeah, it's also a team who I wouldn't, I rarely think the NFL teams are tanking because obviously the players on the field are playing for various reasons. Some of them are not giving great effort, as you point out, but others are and are on I think they're trying to win when they're out there. But they are playing Brady Cook this week. I should have noted on our preview show, in a week where it does appear that Justin Fields and or Tyrod Taylor might be available. So that's about as close to tanking as you really see.
It is. That and continuing to play Quincy Williams is like, oh boys, we're out of this thing.
Okay, why don't we take a quick break just because I think this is a good spot for it. So we've gone over 8 situations. We're leaning that there'll be about 6 gone, but Bengals and Jets are a couple to watch. I'm most fascinated in this cycle about the potential surprises because we could get some big names available based on how the end of the season goes. We'll talk a little bit about the Ravens, Colts, and Bills after the break. Back on NFL Daily. If you're listening to this, it's probably Saturday. We got Saturday games. Maybe it's Sunday, and they've already happened. We've got college football playoff games. I'm wearing my RMFW Tulane sweatshirt. If you know, you know. So let's hope that it's going well in the alternate universe that you're listening to this. Let's talk about what could be the most interesting part of this coaching cycle, and that's the teams with big-name coaches where the last handful of weeks of the season could change things, and maybe someone big shakes loose. And I'll start with the Colts, who I've asked around a little bit about, and I think there's a bigger chance that Shane Steichen does not keep his job than the public would assume because, A, he's coached pretty well, I think, considering their situation. You can see it. You saw the vision for it, obviously, with Daniel Jones. Everyone wants a good play caller. And then, B, you can't really blame this collapse on him when all the players that were making it happen suddenly get hurt on defense, on offense. Obviously, it was happening. And so, logically, you're like, oh, yeah, you would keep Shane Steichen, and who knows, maybe they will win some games with Phillip Rivers. But assuming they don't make the playoffs, you would think he'd be safe. But I've talked to people, and they basically view that as new ownership. Like, yeah, it's Jim Irsay's daughter, but she's going to want her own people in there and put an imprint on the organization. On top of that, Chris Ballard's been there for a decade, and this was always a win or else year. And even if really bad luck is one of the reasons, if not the biggest reason, they don't make the playoffs, that there still would be a real chance that if they go from 7-1 to 8-9, she's not going to care about why, and that she might be looking for a big fish or just to make a change. Do you think that would be the right move?
I don't think it would be the right move. I agree with you, though. I've spoken to people on the Colts side, on the coaching side, and there's real fear that they think this is it and it's a wrap.
Really?
Which you just don't normally expect from guys who were in the hunt for Coach of the Year, where they all get little, statues from the head coach for saying we all did a great job. That's where they thought this was ending up by the time they got to the Christmas party. That is not how it's feeling there right now. And it's a real shame because how could you have done any better than they did to open the season? Putting up historic stuff on offense, which is his main task. And I get what you're saying about the new ownership, and I agree with that. I mean, making the trade they did for Sauce Gardner is a classic new owner move. Let's go all in. Let's not accept that our quarterback's Daniel Jones. Let's compromise the future for the now because we believe we're a championship contender when we're probably not. So I think that kind of erraticism is to be expected when you get a new owner, and so it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they decide to move on.
Look, Carly Ursay-Gordon has impressed a lot of people with how she's operated, and if she was, making a surprising decision, that would be in keeping with her father's legacy. Certainly at the beginning of his career with Indianapolis, which was more of a disaster. And he's talked about how substance abuse affected that. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about someone who, just might have her own ideas of how she wants the organization to be run. And it's ultimately up to her.
The distinction here from the typical new owner syndrome, like when the Waltons brought the Broncos, and it's like, go and get us Russell Wilson. We're going to go trade draft picks for the famous head coach rather than do like a coaching search of the young, cool candidates. She is a football lifer. She's been working in the football department since she was like a teenager. That is a bit different when you've lived through it, been through so many different regimes anyway, that she will have a good sense of what looks like it's working well, what isn't. I think it's pretty hard to pin the current situation on the regime that's there, unless you're just saying that we looked into Daniel Jones in a sense that was never sustainable. We're only in that situation because of Chris Ballard. And then it would be hard to me to say, well, I'm going to blame Shane Steichen also. But as always, it's hard to remove the coach. Keep the coach and remove the GM.
Yeah. Maybe there's interpersonal dynamics you don't know about. You don't know like who's friends with who inside the building, how all the relationships are. And so there could be more to it. But just from the outside looking in, even if I'm blah on Ballard over the years, right now they have a lot of pieces where continuity seems to make a lot of sense. And I include Anarumo in that. I include a lot of that offensive line that Ballard built in that, and that it makes sense with Steichen. They got to figure out quarterback, but to me, it seems like holding pat and giving this group one more year at least would be the way to go. The Ravens and Steelers, let's kind of blend them together. I do think that there's like a greater chance that one of these two head coaches are not back next year than probably conventional wisdom has it. The more stuff that came out about Tomlin, the more I thought maybe Mike Tomlin doesn't want to be there. That's basically was my read on it, whether he was kind of doing the old Parcells and Sean Payton playbook where they had a job and they had years left on their contract, but they were clearly making it obvious to the rest of the NFL, hey, does anyone want to come get me? That's just my read without asking around about that when it comes to Tomlin. What do you think about the Steelers? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm a broken record on this. When the reason a guy keeps his job is that all I ever hear is how quickly someone else would hire him. It's no longer a defense of the job he has in the place he currently is. It is just every year like clockwork. And we had this with a bit of a loosey-goosey report that we're going to get the Schefter update that our team is so willing to go and get Mike Tomlin. And then he signs a contract extension. This year, a little bit different with there's an option. And so he's safe for next year, but the option for the following year. That makes me think he would be potentially available and would sign off on a trade to somewhere like the Giants, somewhere he respects, somewhere he thinks he could turn the thing around pretty quickly and kind of immediately move into just a better situation for the medium term that he's constructed himself where he currently is.
And I wonder where the Steelers are at in this. It seems like they would rather let's just keep keeping him. Yep. And even if there's shortcomings, they must see these reports out there. They're obviously more in tune with it than we are, and wonder if their coach has a wandering eye. And this is where, how these seasons end mean everything, unfortunately. Like, I think that's short-sighted to base it all on the last few games of the season when you have a track record of like what he is great at as a coach. And I think he could be someone that is better in another spot, but just needs a refresh. Maybe the Steelers need a refresh. They finish at Detroit, at Cleveland, and then home for Baltimore. There's a pretty realistic scenario where they've clinched the division before even playing Baltimore if the Ravens can't pull off wins here. And so if the Steelers have a home playoff game, and it's just hard for me to imagine that thing changing. If the Ravens don't make the playoffs, I think Harbaugh's out. That is just a total gut thought. It just feels like time. I personally think he probably should be out if they don't make the playoffs. And in general, it just feels like time. Doesn't mean he doesn't have a million strengths as a head coach and that he had a great run, but all runs have to end sometime. And I would think about, if I'm the owner there and the front office, do we want John Harbaugh being the head coach of Lamar Jackson his entire career? Well, I kind of want to see something else. I just would.
You're in the camp of Mike McDaniel, right? You just want to see Lamar with McDaniel?
I mean, that would be fun. You could suggest out of our other options who else would be fun there. Like, would Kevin Stefanski be fun there? I do think that's an organization where maybe the head coach is it's not like Pete Carroll in Seattle or anything. It's part of a larger operation, and you slide a head coach. I mean, Brian Billick to me was not like leading that organization, and Harbaugh's been great at what he does, but sometimes it's the coordinators and it's everything else. It's a whole system. So let's just plug someone else in the system. We're not taking Lamar out, so let's plug that spot differently.
I do imagine if they did it, it would be someone within the family. I imagine that's why Jesse Minter would have his eye lasered on. He could go and do that. I'm with you. I think it's time. I think in both organizations there's a real sense of fatigue. I think particularly the Steelers have run out of ideas, but with the Ravens too, it feels like they're out of ideas. And you could find a new voice that's within the family, which is pretty unusual for a team to get, and a team that cares about that stuff. And so I just think if Jesse Minter's available and he's going to be a head coach for 15 years in the league, I'd want to be on that train early rather than hang around and go down the end of the cliff with Harbaugh here, where we should be better than we are, and we watch Jesse Minter wander off somewhere else and have a great career.
Now, it'd be really interesting if it was Minter head coach and he like kept Todd Monken, because to me, I'm mostly thinking about, all right, who's going to maximize Lamar Jackson? Where are you at with the Todd Monken experience, by the way?
Not as impressive this year as in previous years. And I think about this with all coaches. I think people have a tendency to say they are good, they are bad. I think people have good seasons, bad seasons. People get tired, they run out of ideas. The cycle of the league can kind of ebb and flow in the way your philosophy kind of overlays with the meta trends of the league. Someone like Vance Joseph, I talk about all the time. I've been banging the drum for him to get a head job for like 4 seasons. I think it's going to cycle out of him being as useful as he is right now. And then you're going to hire him at the tail end of the cycle where his defense was a real value add to have him running your team. And I feel like that with Monken, where they've run a little bit out of ideas, obviously compromised by the offensive line. Lamar's injury, he's not moved the same way, but it feels a little more stale compared to in the previous few seasons.
I'm informed here too by when they did fire Brian Billick, and people were surprised. That was a Super Bowl champion who wasn't, the team wasn't a disaster. They had a down year, obviously. And I believed all the reports about how close John Harbaugh was to losing his job before Lamar Jackson essentially saved it. And John Harbaugh knew from the minute Lamar started playing like that, this is my guy. And he tried to support him, and he supported him publicly. But you just feel like that this organization, I think they've seen it, and it's just been diminishing returns. Now feels like the time. Then again, they could win these games. They could win a couple playoff games, and that would shut me up. I'd be a little surprised if that happened.
I think it's tricky because for the Steelers, I don't see a clear option that you would say we feel comfortable as, if not an upgrade, is pretty similar. And they've not done a coaching search since when, like the 20s? Like when was the last time they did an actual coaching search for a candidate? Whereas with the Ravens, there is that kind of perfect middle ground of guy who seems to be peaking at the right time, is ready for the head coaching gig. He knows us, understands our language. As you said, we kind of plug a guy into the building rather than come and run and, overhaul the whole building. So I think the timing just makes sense for the Ravens. Get Lamar a new voice, get a younger, more exciting, more innovative staff. I think that would make sense for them.
I'd be very surprised if former Eagles coworkers Sean McDermott or Andy Reid are not back with their team, but I just thought I'd throw them out. There's a little red meat there. Just, you never know. In Andy Reid's case, it would just be for him to make a decision that everyone that covers the team the most closely says is just not happening. He signed an extension through 29. You just never know at his age if he would decide to step down. That's very unlikely. McDermott's a little different. They're playing well right now. It's very easy to imagine them winning playoff games, maybe even making the Super Bowl and making this conversation moot. But in a different world where, let's say they finish 12-5 or 11-6 and they lose in the first round, what are your thoughts about like the Bills situation?
Yeah, I think I was more on the McDermott should leave train last offseason, where I thought you could maybe go and get one of the super innovative offensive coaches and just pair it up with Allen. Could you go and be the Ben? If that job was available, every coach in the land would be lining up to go take it. You could have brought Ben Johnson in. I think with the candidate pool this year, I'd be more inclined to just give it one more season. I think McDermott's actually done a very impressive coaching job on game days. The game plans have been a bit of a whiff over time, but I think that personnel is pretty poor. And it's grossly overstated often because of McDermott and because of Josh Allen. And it's more of a talent evaluation issue than it is a game day coach issue. He may take the fall if they fall short in the playoffs, but I think he's coached pretty well himself on game days this year and deserves another shot.
I agree. I would lean pretty heavily towards keeping him. Trying to think of
I guess it's the history of the league is that guys don't stay together this long and then win their first one. It's just that simple. And it's the same with Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. You just don't see it where a coach quarterback combination goes 6, 7, 8 years and finally break through. And so if you're looking at history of the league now, Josh Allen is different. Maybe he could do it. Maybe he does break through this year. That would certainly be in my mind if I was running the team, that a new voice could be impactful.
Yeah, it's a good call in terms of like the QB conversation. I mean, the QB quarterback combination, that it tends to happen earlier, but he's a tricky one, McDermott, because I'm trying to think of the perfect quarterback comp. Maybe it's Jared Goff, like just in terms of where he is in the pecking order. Like obviously there are coaches that are at a level Sean McDermott's I don't think ever going to get to, as in terms of being a complete difference-making head coach, but yeah, like go find a better quarterback than Jared Goff. It's not going to be that easy for you to do so. I don't know if like McDermott's that high, and coaches I think are ultimately a little easier to find than quarterbacks, but there's a big risk if you decide to move on that it could certainly go worse.
On the Reed thing quickly is that I find that fascinating because this is a dynasty unlike any other where they've experienced no brain drain. The only guy to leave is Eric Bieniemy, and that was partly a mutual decision, right, to go and chase the next rung of the job ladder. We've not had before where they have had, in combination, the greatest offensive designer of his lifetime, the greatest defensive coordinator of his generation, the best offensive line coach of his generation, and maybe the best special teams coach of his generation, all together at once, all the way through. They look so out of ideas this season. And I feel like if Reed doesn't go, I'll be very much open to, and I would hope someone like Patrick Mahomes would go and say, we need new, young, fresh faces. Usually that self-manages itself because everyone leaves. Everyone left Saban, everyone left Belichick. You got to go find new people. They've almost put themselves into this bucket where it's the same guys all the time, the same voices. So if Reed doesn't go, I do think they've got to say, Matt Nagy, you're out. Someone else that is kind of shocking, you're out. Maybe Steve Spagnuolo takes a new job. But particularly on offense, I think they desperately need new, young voices.
It's a great and weird point about their continuity, which has been such a strength for them. And like, they're not going to change their offensive line coach, but I think you're right that some new, fresh voices would be great. And you think about all the other teams that are been less successful. The Rams, certainly, basically anyone in that coaching tree, but the Ravens too. Like the Ravens have been cycling through coordinators forever, especially on defense, because they get better jobs, and that just hasn't happened. All right, Spagnuolo is one of the retreads. Let's go through it. You helped divide the list up of potential candidates into different categories. So we'll start with the retreads, and I'll throw Jim Schwartz in there too, although to me he'd be a long shot, I guess, to get another head coaching job. Spags would be interesting. I do think there could be an appetite for him getting some interviews, and the Giants specifically would be an interesting fit for him. I've listened to Chris Long on his podcast in the past saying, like, man, it wasn't Spags' fault in St. Louis. No one was going to win in that situation. Like, we feel bad that, like, Spags is such a good coach that we let him down. And there is a possibility he could be better the second time around. But we have McCarthy. Robert Saleh, I think, could be a guy who gets interest. Brian Flores, if organizations can look past the, lawsuit between Flores and the league. Vance Joseph, you already touched on. Belichick, I guess we could throw in there. Stefanski, like a lot of names. Who kind of stands out? Who do you want to start with there?
The one that stands out to me, I don't know if you read him off there, is Mike McCarthy. I think there's not a huge distinction between the resumes of Mike McCarthy and Sean Payton. And yet Sean Payton was heralded because he's friends with everyone in the media as being like the guy you got to go trade draft picks for. Mike McCarthy's just available. Now, the third go-around coach is a slightly different than the second go-round coach. And I do accept that. But putting him in a place like Tennessee, where it's just a complete disaster behind the scenes, there is not a level of accountability, a level of competence. I think him being a kind of bridge guy for a young quarterback would make a lot of sense, whether it's there, whether it's the Giants, somewhere like that, where it's like, let's just stabilize, be normal, be ordinary for 2 seasons. And then when we want to go and shoot for the moon, we can thank Mike for laying the foundations and go find someone else.
Not too different from really what happened in Dallas, although they did win a lot of games.
Yeah.
Third time around, I'm a little surprised. I appreciate what you're saying. I feel like if Ollie's actually running a team, he gives McCarthy an interview. He leaks it out to the media that he's one of the 3 finalists because he feels bad for him or likes him. Like, he does genuinely like him, but he doesn't hire him.
Oh, no. I would not do that. That's true. It's tough because the kind of general picture of the candidates list is the retreads and kind of the guys who have the most cachet at the moment. First of all, I hate the way we hire head coach, which is which coordinator was good last year. It just makes no sense why guys fail all the time. Do they have the right schools and stuff to run a building is how I would interview the guys more so than just which coordinator did well. But the offensive guys where it gets tricky. Everyone wants one of these offensive gurus, one of these offensive minds. They're all looking for Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen. It's just pretty dry. If it's not Cliff Kingsbury, it's guys who are 20, like Grant Udinski or Declan Doyle, or guys who've been in the league 2 or 3 seasons because they're in college. So it's tough to find people who fit, which is where you just kind of alight, I think. If you're just going through offensive pecking order and you're not in the Kingsbury world, that's just not your vibe, trying to reestablish a building. That's when I think you hit on Mike McCarthy's like default saying, this isn't the best cycle. We had to move on from Brian Callahan. Let's give it to Mike for a couple of seasons.
I could see it. Between those other guys, a Spags second time around, Flores second time around, Saleh, the defensive guys, Vance Joseph, who would you like the most?
I always want to go for Vance, so I'll say Vance so it's out there publicly because I really want him to get a crack at doing it again. The guy I would hire if my owner approved, interviewing the guy that's suing him currently would probably be Flores. I think he's got the best Rolodex to build the staff around him. I do worry about putting him back in charge of a whole facility and what that may do and what it was like in Miami. Everyone says he's calmed down. It's not as bad as it used to be. When the pressure gets mounting and it's stressful and you're not sleeping and you're in charge of travel again, might be different. But I think he would be one of the defensive guys who could find the stream of young offensive minds who keep getting picked off the staff every season. You've got to keep refreshing that the way someone like McDermott has had to do. I think Flores of those guys would be the guy I'd take the punt on.
And the reality is, other than if the Ravens job opens up, it's not like there's these ready-made jobs where you have a strong front office and an ownership situation. Every one of these jobs is going to have different challenges. I guess Austin Fort is probably going to be in place in Arizona, but even that, you just look at the history there. He'd be the most fun to watch.
The highest floor is Robert Saleh. I think Robert Saleh will always get you in his second go-around to 7 wins, and that's the floor. Is he the kind of guy who can put you over the top? There's been so much brain drain from the people he's worked with before. I did not love, even though he's doing a very good job this season with the tools available, not taking the year off if I was going to hire him and not going and getting outside of his comfort zone, going back to the Niners. So I think he's an outstanding coach, excellent defensive guy, could be the Spags of his generation, just be the guy everyone wants to hire as the defensive coach. I would have loved him to do a year out and go and survey all the college campuses and go and find all the cool new ideas. Bringing him in and it just becomes a facsimile of that Jets job again, and he brings a LaFleur back with him, whichever LaFleur brothers rolling around. I wouldn't be interested in that.
Whichever LaFleur. And there's not that many LaFleur brothers. Mike LaFleur, NFL Daily guest at training camp back in August. All right, the defensive guys, then the young guys. Minter, to me, seems like the top guy and will get a lot of interviews in this cycle. Other possibilities, Chris Shula will probably get attention from Los Angeles. Like he's a younger coach that hasn't had a lot of experience in front of the podium, and there will be questions of okay, how can he lead an entire organization? That's fair for most of these first time coaches. Anthony Weaver could get looks. He's the defensive coordinator with Miami. Jeff Hafley, the defensive coordinator for the Packers. Your beloved Lou Anarumo with the Colts right now, and then Anthony Campanile. I think that's probably a year or two ahead from him really getting attention, but has done a good job with the Jaguars. Why do you think it sounds like Minter would be an interesting pick?
Yeah, I think he's a superstar. I think he's one of the special ones. Hiding out there, it's the perfect age, perfect ideas, perfect pipeline of coaches, whether it's any of the guys that are left at Michigan or the people he could pick off the Chargers staff, and has an unbelievable feel already for what a good program should look and sound like. There's really cool things around the facility that is not traditional NFL stuff that I know he's implemented with the Chargers that I think you could take into an organization and would improve them massively. I actually don't think he's the kind of schematic guru in the way he's billed as Mike McDonald. It's a lot more basic than the stuff Seattle do. But whenever I've watched him talk and speak and work at coaching clinics and things like that, it just jumps off the screen that he operates at a different level, and the organization and the principles, I just think look, smell, sound like a guy who's got the goods.
I think Anthony Weaver has a little bit of that, where if he's in the room, I think he'll impress ownership in that he does make sense as a guy who's done a good job schematically there in Miami. They're not amazing, but he certainly has done a solid job. But a guy that you could see kind of leading an organization.
Yeah, I thought that last cycle, I thought he'd be the sneaky hire. I thought the Jets would look in that direction, that he would blow people away once he got in the room. I think this one is tough and cramped because you've got Minter and Shula, and then you maybe have the retreads. If Saleh gets one, you start running out of jobs where you become the guy who impressed in the interview. We didn't mention, by the way, during the jobs, the Miami Dolphins. If there's a Shula available and the Dolphins job is available, then all of a sudden you start looking at that one. Though I do think the Stephen Ross would go big game hunting if they decide to do that. But you're so in on just McDaniel staying, I guess.
No, I'm an idiot. This is why I need an editor. Give me a break. How did we go through the whole episode? How did no one see this? I went through all the teams. I must have just been so sick of talking about the Dolphins situation all week. Oh, I think he's gone. I think there's been a lot of talk that they would like to keep him, and I think it depends on who you're talking to there necessarily, and it just doesn't make logical sense that they're going to essentially require the next GM to keep Mike McDaniel. It's possible, and it's not the craziest idea ever. Like, he has strengths as a head coach, but he would be on my leaning gone list. So I'm glad you fixed that hole. Thank you.
I would go with leaning gone with him too. I understand the reasons why you would consider it. You say, we think we've got a guy who is a force multiplier as an offensive designer. What if he had a real pro quarterback? That sounds pretty good. Sounds better than some of the options out there. And if our options are, it's Stefanski, it's Grant Udinski, a 28-year-old running our building, or it's Mike McDaniel, I could see how you could talk yourself into that. Just the way Stephen Ross is, I assume he'll go chasing a big name on the market.
Okay, so the big names, there aren't many that are offensive guys right now. Cliff Kingsbury, you mentioned. Udinski is one of the youngest, maybe the youngest coordinator in the league for Jacksonville. I do think Liam Cohen, people are going to just want to get a piece of what Liam Cohen has been doing after really a skyrocket in terms of his status within the league the last couple of years. Declan Doyle, you mentioned, who's with the Bears right now. But it's guys I have a hard time imagining get serious looks. Clayton Adams, maybe with Dallas, who's helped to design their running game. Mike Kafka, I think, has a chance for New York to keep the Giants job, but it just hasn't gone well as an interim, so that's not going to help him. Among those offensive guys, who catches your eye?
It's pretty tough. I love Clayton Adams. I have a hard time seeing him stepping up to the top podium at this stage. And that's where it's just tight. I would be, if you're taking the swing for the fence, if you're the Titans, you're saying, we stink, but we think we got the quarterback. Let's just go and take a punt on having Sean McVay. That's where I would look at doing the Udinski. Now, I don't love the idea of a 29-year-old running the whole team. That would be concerning. But of the guys you see and look and go, he seems different to all the other guys who come through as they stood near McVay. Those type of coaches, whether it's a LaFleur, whoever it is, he does feel a little bit different. So if you're taking a swing, that's the guy I take the swing on.
I mean, the thing about the whole they stood near McVay hires is they've mostly worked. I mean, the hit rate's been way higher than a normal head coaching.
That's where I think Nate Scheelhaas with the Rams has a chance. He's only been in the league 2 years, which is, again, you wouldn't want necessarily running the whole thing. But if you're looking for the guy who stood near him, Shula gets a lot of the attention for that. But if you're leading, well, we really want the offensive stuff that Sean does. That's kind of why we're interviewing you. He's older. He's a bit more experienced. So I could see him being a real outside hire. The other one would be Davis Webb, who I think if you're going again, the young, got to take a swing route. We're not interested in Mike McCarthy and retread offensive mind. Cliff Kingsbury is not our style of just dude around the office. I think Davis Webb probably has a little bit more experience, being in multiple buildings. I think will come across really well in the interview. So I could see him being a kind of an outside hire. But once you get past those guys, you're into the Clint Kubiak, which just isn't for me. You're into Todd Monken, which feels like maybe you're doing it 10 years too late as a head coach in the league. That would have to be we're making him the head coach of the Ravens because Lamar wants him situation to me, or he's going with Josh Allen, the Bills, like a premier quarterback, and he can just kind of add on to the top there rather than turning a team around.
And you mentioned Davis Webb. Just for the listeners, he is I wanted to get his title right for the Broncos, the offensive pass game coordinator and the quarterbacks coach. I knew he was the quarterbacks coach there and had some other title where they now like split coordinator titles like among 3 people. He also authored like that terrible not tush push, but QB sneak. Remember from like 99 yards away? Am I crazy to remember that?
That's
That
right.
was a sad moment. I mean, he's only 30 years old. I was like, that was only a couple years ago that Davis Webb was making sad starts for the Giants. So,
But this is the thing, when we're talking about the other jobs, they come open, everyone wants to get rid of their coach. I get it. You think they're a bozo. If you want to get rid of the coach because you want to go chase the next offensive mind, you really are tapping out pretty quickly unless you want to take a swing on a guy who's been in the league 2 or 3 years, or a guy who's just incredibly young, even though he's coached his entire life. Those are pretty big risks to take. If you're going to have players who are significantly older than your head coach stood in front of the room.
yeah, there are not a lot of obvious offensive options. Even among the retreads, they're mostly defensive coaches. I guess I can't have Ollie on without, asking if Josina's reporting, she had more on Thursday morning that there's multiple high up people with a couple organizations who are at least sort of considering maybe giving Bill Belichick a call. I can't imagine. Well, I definitely can't imagine he gets a job, but do you even think he gets a real deal interview in this cycle?
Real deal interview, I'm not sure. A phone call, I think, yes. And I think that's the Falcons. And I think that probably already took place to gauge interest. I think that door A, door B thing for Arthur Blank is like a real thing that he doesn't know why he went down one after the fact. So I think the calls will take place. I cannot see it happening.
That just would be sad times for the Falcons to hire Bill Belichick 10 years after 28-3. It just very Falcons. That was great. We will be obviously tracking all the coaching news throughout the next couple of weeks on NFL Daily. Ollie, I won't talk to you on the show before Christmas, so have a great Christmas. And for everyone listening, we obviously have many more shows before Christmas. We will be back on Sunday night to, recap those big-time Saturday games, including that Bears-Packers. I cannot wait for that. And then, Jags, Broncos to me is just fascinating on Sunday, along with Ravens, Patriots. We will see you there in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio, recapping it all.